Someone stood up for you, finally. And not just in a, oh, I agree with them kind of way. I'm talking about a real, full-throated, unsolicited defense of your name, your character, your side of your story. And here's the part that's probably going to hit you the hardest. You didn't ask them to. You didn't even know it was happening. You are just out there living your life, maybe even thinking the whole thing was over and done with. And somewhere else, in a room you are not in, someone just put their entire reputation on the line for you. And the person they are standing up against, they never saw it coming. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought the narrative they'd so carefully built was airtight. And now, because of this one strange single person who decided they'd had enough, the whole thing is starting to unravel. Quietly, publicly, one word at a time. Let's just let that land for a second. Because I know for a lot of you watching this, there is a specific situation, a specific group of people, a specific person who, for whatever reason, decided to make you their project. They decided to craft a version of you that had nothing to do with the person you actually are. And they got to work. They got planting that version, watering it, making sure it took root in the minds of anyone who mattered. You felt it. You felt the weight of it. The way a room would get a little quieter when you walked in, the way an invitation would never come, the way a door you were trying to open would mysteriously, quietly slam shut in front of your face. You knew something was wrong, but you could never quite prove it. It was just a feeling, a persistent, nagging, exhausting feeling that you were being talked about, but in a way you couldn't correct. And now, finally, someone said something. But to really understand the significance of what's happening, you have to understand the environment. First, the environment this story was born in. It wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was the end of a long, silent war of attrition. For a long time, this person defending you was just watching. Yeah, they were in the thick of it. They were in the meetings, the group chats, the family gatherings, the social circles where this person, your antagonist, was busy at work. They saw now the story was being told. They saw how your name was being dropped, the little signs, the "I'm just worried about them" comments that were really just thinly veiled attacks. They saw the whole performance and they stayed quiet. It wasn't out of agreement. That's important. And it wasn't out of cowardness. It was more like a scientist watching an experiment. They were waiting to see how far it would go. They were waiting to see if this person was capable of stopping themselves. And then one day they went too far. And something in this person snapped. It wasn't a dramatic explosion, it was a screaming match. It wasn't a screaming match, it was the kind of quiet, definitive snap that happens in people who are almost never moved to anger. It was the sound of patience finally reaching its absolute limit. They just came to a point conversation, probably. A very mundane conversation where the other person said one more thing, one more implication, one more slide against you that was presented as a fact. And this person, your defender, looked at them and said, that's not true, that's not, and they didn't say it aggressively. They just said it. And they kept going. They started listing things. They had the receipts. Maybe it was a memory of a conversation you had with them. Maybe it was a text message that contradicted the story being told. Maybe it was just a simple, clear-eyed observation of how you actually behave. But they offered a piece of concrete, undeniable reality, and they placed it right in the middle of the fantasy they had been built. The room, whatever room it was, went quiet. Not an awkward silence, but a silence of realization. And that was the first domino. That was the moment when the story this person had been carefully constructing for months, maybe even years, started to show its first genuine crack. You have to understand who this person is. The one who started all of it. This isn't just someone who didn't like you. This is someone with a specific kind of ego. It's the kind of ego that needs to be right. Always. It needs to be the authority. It needs its version of events to be the version of events. Yeah. They are not just confident. They are performatively confident. They have built their entire social and professional standing on being the person who frames the narrative, who controls the conversation, who people automatically look to for the correct interpretation of things. They are persuasive. They know how to hold a room, how to make you feel like you are on the inside of a secret, how to make their opinion feel like a fact. And then there was you. And for whatever reason, you broke their algorithm. You didn't perform for them. You didn't perform. You didn't seek their approval. You didn't need their validation. You just showed up, being yourself. And you were perfectly content. You had no angle. You had no hidden agenda. You had no price. And that, to a person like this, is not just confusing. It's a threat. It's a threat because it exposes a flaw in their own psychology. They cannot control you. They cannot predict you. They cannot place you in a box. And people who are not easily managed or slotted into an easy narrative make people like this intensely uncomfortable. They make them feel seen in a way they don't want to be seen. They make them feel a lack of control in one domain, their social standing, where they most need to feel in control. So because they couldn't sit with that feeling of being uncomfortable around you, because they couldn't look inward and ask, why does this who has done nothing wrong bother me so much? They took a shortcut. They externalized the problem. They projected. The logic is simple. If you make them feel this bad, there must be something wrong with you. You must be the one hiding something. You must be fake. You must be the problem. And so they studied the narrative. They created the story. And then a funny thing happened. Really, the story took on a life of its own. It started small, just a comment here, a rumor there, a subtle implication, but with each retelling, it grew. And this person, because they are persuasive, and because they are the authority in their circle, people listened, people believed it. They heard the confident tone, they heard the authority, and they just accepted it. It's human nature. Our brains are wired to fill in gaps of knowledge with trust, especially if the person doing the talking seems like they have all the information. Most of us. But here is where it gets interesting. The story kept changing. The details kept shifting. The timeline kept getting more elaborate. They told it so many times to so many different people in so many slightly different ways that they couldn't keep their own versions straight. It's like building a house of cards. Impressive to look at, but always fragile. Every time detail you add to a lie is another card on the desk. And eventually the weight of the whole structure becomes too much to support. And the people listening, they might not have said anything, but they noticed. They filed it away. They felt the way a detail from one version didn't match the detail from a previous version. The way the story seemed to have grown legs. And the entire time the story was growing, you were just gone. You had removed yourself from that situation. You'd had enough. You felt the walls closing in, you felt the whispers, and you just walked away. You decided your peace was more important than a fight you were never going to win, in a room you were never going to be fully heard in. And while you were out there rebuilding, while you were focusing on the life you actually wanted to live, this story was still being told in your absence. It was calculating in a group chat you were no longer in. It was being referenced in meetings you don't attend. It was being used to justify decisions that cut you out. And then the moment came, the moment that flipped the whole board over. It happened in a conversation, a specific conversation with a specific audience. The person your antagonist, was holding court. They were on a roll and they were telling the story again, maybe with a few more flourishes than usual, expecting their audience to nod along. They expected the knowing looks, they expected the murmurs of agreement. They expected to be validated once again as the righteous one, and you to be the one in the wrong. They were at the peak of their power, the moment in the performance where they feel most in control. And then they made a mistake. They asked the room for confirmation. They said something, maybe even directly aimed at your defender, expecting an echo of support. They looked for the head nods. They waited for the totally. And you're so right. And instead, they were met with silence. Not a hostile silence, not an awkward silence, just a silence. A silence that was louder than any argument, a silence that felt like the air had been sucked out of a room. And then in that silence, one person looked at another, and the other person was usually the first to laugh at this person's jokes or reinforce their opinion, looked away. The room, which a moment ago was theirs to command, suddenly wasn't. That is the moment. That is the moment. That is the small, almost invisible turning point. That's when it all started coming undone. So the person who was holding the floor, your defender, they saw that silence, they saw the shift, and they decided to lean into it. They decided to stay on your side, to say the thing that needed to be said. It wasn't just a defense of you anymore. It was a simple question. A question they could not answer. What is your problem with them? It was asked calmly. It was asked directly. And the person at the center of this whole drama, the one who was always so quick with a retort, the one who was always so articulate, went blank. They had nothing. They were used to winning debates by arguing people. But they were not ready for that. They were not ready for the question, simple question that skipped past the details and went straight to the motive. They were not ready for the question that forced them to look at their own obsession. You see, this is the thing about people like this. They are experts at deflection. They can pivot a conversation before you even realize it's happening. They can spin, wave, and out-talk almost anyone in almost any situation. But when you bypass the argument and go for the root of it, there is no good answer. There is only one answer. And it's the one they have been trying to hide from everyone, including themselves. Which is, it was never about you. It was never about you. It was always about what you made them feel about themselves. And that is the truth that's now sitting in the room. This is what people are thinking about. That's why the story is falling apart. That's why. Because once someone points out that the motive was never the person being attacked, but the attacker's own insecurity, the entire story becomes irrelevant. The whole thing just collapses on itself. The spotlight that was carefully directed at you has now been turned onto them, and they are standing in it, squinting, trying to figure out how to get out of the light. And you, the person at the center of it all, you are not even there. You have moved on. You built a new life. You have a new routine. You have new people. This whole thing is ancient history to you, or at least you've made peace with it. But now the facts are just too heavy to be ignored anymore. Stories can be manipulated, but facts have a weight. Facts have a permanence. And once one person starts putting facts next to the story, the weight imbalance becomes visible to everyone. The people who were silently filing away inconsistencies are now quietly letting them out, slowly and carefully. A comment here, a memory there, but once one person says, That's not what I remember. It gives permission to the next person to say it, and the next, and the next. And now the conversation has shifted. It's no longer about you, it's about the person who made it about you. The conversation has moved past the accusations to ask the only question that matters now. Why does it say, what does it say about them that they couldn't let this go even after you were long gone? And they are starting to hear the answer. They are starting to see the looks. They are starting to feel. They are feeling the air in the room change. Some of you are probably in a professional space. A job, an office, a company. You had a boss or a manager or someone senior. And for whatever reason, they decided you were a threat. They documented things unfairly. They pushed you toward the exit. They gave you the cold shoulder until you had no choice but to leave. Or they made sure the people above them had a very specific impression of you before you could even make your own impression. And you left, or you were pushed out. And someone who stayed, a co-worker, a friend, someone who saw everything, who watched your boss's behavior, who knows the truth of the dynamic, they are now saying it out loud with specifics to people who matter. And the version of events this person is in authority has been selling is not surviving that contact. Maybe it's not professional, maybe it's personal. A family member, a friend group, a community. Someone decided to make you a villain, the villain of a story you didn't even know you were in. Someone you trusted, someone who used your secrets and your vulnerabilities to paint a picture of you that was unrecognizable, and you walked away. It was the healthiest thing to do. But that person kept the story going, even after you were gone. And someone in that circle finally asked them, why? Why are you still doing this? Why are you so obsessed? Either way, the blueprint is the same. The structure is the same. And the outcome is the same. The house of cards is falling down. And through all of this, you have just been living. You've moved on. You are not waiting for an apology. You're not waiting for the world to realize the truth. You are not monitoring the fallout. You are not obsessing over what they deserve. You are not wishing them well, but you are not wishing them ill either. You are just gone. And that, more than anything, is the most powerful thing you could have done. Because while you have been doing that, while you have been building something new and finding peace, finding your tribe and living, they have been sitting in a loop about you. They have been thinking about you, monitoring you, feeling the anger or the resentment or the jealousy. They have been pouring energy into a person who barely thinks about them. And that's not a form of justice in itself. That's a form of justice in itself. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, natural order kind. The kind that comes from simply outgrowing a situation. This isn't about you being better than them. No, it's about you moving on and them being stuck. You are not carrying this out. You are not building a case. You are just out here living your life, probably not even aware of half of what is unfolding in rooms you are no longer in. And I want to say one more thing before we wrap this up. Something I think you need to hear. You are not the villain of anyone's story who actually knows you. I need you to let that sink in. I know there was a period, I think there was a period, maybe a quiet one, a private one, where you turned it all over in your head, where you wondered, is there something to it? Is there something wrong with me? Did I do something to invite this? You sat with that question longer than was fair. And the answer you came to is no. No, the person who needed a villain was already looking for one before you walked in. You just happened to be there. And you happened to be someone who could not rattle, or could not manage, could not make small enough to feel okay about themselves. That made you the target. Not your flaws, your wholeness. Yeah, so you don't need to correct the story. You don't need to clarify. You don't need to make sure the right people know the right versions. You don't need to have a conversation to clear your name. The truth is moving on its own. It doesn't need your help. Yeah. And the person in your corner has already done the heavy lifting. The rest is just a matter of gravity or time. The facts are moving. Let them. Good things are coming into your life. Not as a reward for suffering, but because you kept going with your integrity intact. Because you removed yourself from what wasn't right for you, from this bad energy. Because you kept your channel clean, and now things can come through it that couldn't before. You cleared the space. The people who counted on that never happening, they see it, they are sitting with it right now, and you are just out here being exactly who you are. Someone finally spoke up for you, and it's quietly, completely, and irrevocably destroying everything they built. And you are nowhere near it.